Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to discover your life purpose, then do we have the Life You Were Born to Live show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dan Millman, former world champion gymnast, coach, martial arts teacher, the runaway international best-selling author of Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and a phenomenal guide and 1 million book bestseller for discovering your life purpose, The Life You Were Born to Live. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about an amazing life purpose system to find meaning, purpose, and direction in your life. That, plus we'll talk about the law of love, 9-year cycles, life as school, majors and minors, the law of flexibility, and why, if you don't like the way I drive, you want to get off the sidewalk. So, welcome back to the show, Dan. Are you ready to shine?
I was born ready, Michael.
Woohoo! So before we dive right into things, the question you've been asked probably one time too many, so please forgive me, Dan. Who did you meet in 1984 who became your mentor, colleague, and friend?
I like that question because it provides a context. My best known book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and the movie playing with Nick Nolte as the old gentleman in the gas station. Um, I, the true story is I'd actually shattered my leg in a motorcycle crash before I met him, where in the book it was the other way around.
Uh-huh.
And maybe that opened me up to paying attention to what I had not paid attention to before, because I wandered into that all night gas station about 3 in the morning. It was a late night date, and I was walking back to my um, boarding place where I lived
Yeah.
at Berkeley, and I wandered into this old Texaco station. And this old guy was an all-night worker, mechanic, and he wouldn't tell me his real name, but there was something about him, kind of a cosmic old guy. And I ended up calling him Socrates. He reminded me of the old Greek sage. So that formed a basis, the teaching relationship, like Frodo and Gandalf, or Arthur and Merlin, that traditional, or Castaneda and Don Juan, that traditional student teacher. He became the archetypal teacher for me. And I shared those conversations and experiences in my first book. And that provided a foundation. I didn't write another book for 10 years until suddenly new mentors came into my life, particularly one I'll call the warrior priest, whom I'll mention more later.
Very, very cool. And forgive me, I had forgotten about that. I was talking to you about bicycle racing a few minutes ago. I think you may still I have the titanium femurs through my legs, both of
Mm,
them, and the pins going into my hip, which maybe you had as well.
wow. Well, if we're comparing surgeries, my leg was shattered in about 40 pieces, my
Yep,
femur,
yep,
and
yep.
they did put a nail down the middle of the bone. They took it out a year later. It was bothering my hip. But yes, sometimes those things happen and shakes us up, and I'm pointing up right now. I'm sure that occurred to you too, where we start asking bigger questions about life. So adversity does have its hidden gifts.
It does, absolutely. So was it from him that you started to discover this system, or was it from your next mentor?
Was actually the next mentor. By the way, a little preview I'm sharing, a semi-secret. I'm working toward, but not yet into, my final book. I'm pretty sure it will be my last long form work, and it's going to be appropriately a memoir, telling the story behind the story, and it's going to cover 4 very different mentors who impacted my life and work as the motif for the spiritual search. But it will be all true as I can possibly remember it. No invented or fictionalized elements as I've done in my earlier books.
Yeah, so Socrates, as I understand, is kind of an amalgamation and fictionalized to drive home a point. Would that be a good way to describe him?
As good as any. He's a paradox and a mystery. He was based on an actual flesh and blood old guy I met in that gas station as described. Um, in terms of the amount of time I spent with him, remember, 14 years passed from the time I met him to the time I wrote the book. So I met other mentors, other influences during those 14 years. And so they began to flesh out, including my own experiences, maybe even my own higher self, fleshed out his character when I finally wrote the book.
Very, very cool. So I don't want to give away your whole next book, although we have got to have you on the show. Like the day it is an ebook, you get that to me and let's get you booked. With that said, what can you tell us about your next mentor, kind of this warrior priest?
Not too much yet, but I will say, um, how do I put it? Well, look, after I wrote Peaceful Warrior,
Yeah,
I didn't write another book for 10 years, Michael, because I felt I'd said what I had to say. It
yeah.
felt pretty good. I got it out there and was gradually building by word of mouth. Um, but 10 years later, that's when I met the warrior priest. And suddenly I had all this new information that was really exciting to me. And I wanted to share it with people in my own way. So I wrote um, an odd sequel to Peaceful Warrior called Sacred Journey of the Peaceful Warrior. Takes place in Hawaii with a kahuna, a woman teacher this time. And so that was sort of part of my motif, telling a story and conveying information through the story. But then people started writing to me saying, I was so inspired by your first two books, but how can I apply all this to everyday life? So I wrote my third book, No Ordinary Moments, A Peaceful Warrior's Guide to
Mhm.
Everyday Life. I couldn't do it as a story. I wanted to, but it had so much information I wanted to convey. I couldn't have stuffed it all into a story. So it worked as a nonfiction guidebook. But then the next book I wrote was The Life You Were Born to Live, the kind of the main topic today.
Yeah.
And and people said, "Has Dan gone off on a numerology tangent? I don't get it. He's always been so practical and down to earth, common sense. Now I've got this thing. Well, yeah, how can adding up the numbers of your date of birth possibly give valid, reliable, accurate information about the core issues of your life?" And that is the elephant in the room, because anybody, a healthy skeptic, and we ought to be skeptical and have a sense of discernment, it doesn't make any sense. I don't have a theory for it of how you can add up the apparently arbitrary numbers of your date of birth, whether you were premature, on time, induced, C-section, um, twins, whatever. When you were born, when you take your first breath, it's like your parents give you a name and spirit or the universe gives you a frequency or a number. And anybody who feels skeptical, I say good for you, except the mind works like a parachute, works best when it's open. So just check it out. And even at the outset here, whether people wait till the end of the of our conversation
Mhm.
or now even, if they just jump to peacefulwarrior.com and click right away on the life purpose calculator, it's free. They'll immediately see a place they can put in their month, day, and year of birth, and see a number, which is their birth number, and see some key words about their life, and also a paragraph, a sample, as you know, describing some elements of their life. And they can determine for themselves whether it makes sense to them or not. And most people are surprised.
I like it. And if you do go to peacefulwarrior.com, you had mentioned month, day, and year. It's actually reverse. And so, in preparation for this interview, I kind of goofed. So, I'm interested to learn about myself. It is day, month, and year. And I flipped that backwards myself. So, I am completely in the dark as to who I am, Dan. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute. I did my prep. My prep was off, and I kind of like that. That gives me the open vessel for today. This warrior priest introduced you, if I understand right, to this system. And I am guessing, knowing what I know of you, Dan, you were a skeptic.
Oh, definitely. I've been empirically trained, and the scientific method pulled us out of the dark ages of superstition. So I'm a big fan of science. Um, but here's what happened. He had read Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It came out about 4 years before we had met, and he had read it. And he said, Dan, I think you're going to do people some good. And I said, how do you know that? Because at that time, the only thing I had taught in my life was gymnastics.
Yeah.
Though I focused on the bigger picture of gymnastics, I'd been exposed to some Zen meditation and so on. Um, but still, that's what I taught. And he said, "Look, I'm going to give you a reading." And I said, "What's a reading?" And he said, "Well, just I'm going to tell you some things that I'm sensing or seeing." So he proceeded in 1 hour to change the course of my life. And he did that in a very concrete way. In other words, that's when I stepped forward. I stood up inside myself and I began to do what I was here to do, and which was teach. And I started writing more books and so on. But after he did this reading for me,
Mhm.
we palled around for a while because we each had things to share. And then he said, I'm teaching an advanced training on one of the islands in Hawaii, and I'd like to invite you there. There was a small group of people. And there he revealed, see, when I asked him, I said, how can you know this about me? Are you a psychic? And he said, no, I'm not a psychic. I've been trained to know where to look. That and my own innate intuition has helped, allows me to do what I do. And when in that advanced training, he was going to show me how to do for other people what he did for me.
Yeah.
And I was on it. So I took about 20 pages of notes, small pages. Those notes I took home with me and started doing free readings for family and friends, anybody who'd listen. And they were all really almost shocked. They were quite impressed with the, how can you know this? And pretty soon I internalized the information and I didn't need my notes anymore. And over an 8-year period, after meeting this warrior priest,
Yeah.
I began to do readings professionally. And after 8 years, I taught 2 trainings just for health professionals in the basics of this system, what I call the life purpose system. And finally, I decided, hey, it's time to write a book. And Jack London once said, Michael, it takes hard writing to make easy reading. And this was a very difficult, hard book to write, but I took great care. And there it was, The Life You Were Born to Live. But after the year 2000, it was out of date because after 2000, there were some actual new life paths on the planet. And so we needed 45, not 37, but 45 life paths. And so it was long overdue. And finally, after 25 years, we put out just recently, as you know, the 25th, a revised and updated 25th anniversary edition with new material and so on. So that's kind of brings you up to date a bit about the warrior priest and his influence
Mhm.
in this material and how I ended up coming to know this.
And I'm blown away that over 1 million copies of this book
Hmm.
is sold. I don't know, can you wrap your mind around how many lives you've changed?
Nope, but it's a great feeling, and we change our own lives. I haven't changed any lives, but maybe I've offered some useful reminders and perspectives that help people walk with their eyes a bit more open through life.
So, diving into this, do you have a way that you want to go about it, or should we use myself and Jessica as guinea pigs here?
Oh, I'm just happy to have you or me and my wife or anybody as guinea pigs. However, just to provide a context,
Yes.
because again, some of your listeners might know of my work, maybe know even about this book, but some it's all what is this numbers and numerology and let me say this that many cultures have had their numerology systems. The Hebrews, the Chinese, the Aztecs, the Mayans, many other cultures, the Chinese. Um, but this system happens to use a different way of adding up the numbers and a different way of interpreting them. And it's used as a reference work by many numerologists now. So I'm really gratified by that. Um, but if you think of 45 life paths that I
Mhm.
describe in the book, so it's not a book you have to read straight through, it's a reference work as well. Um, you divide 45 into the population of the planet, that means millions of people are working each and every one of those life paths. Am I saying everyone's the same personality or alike in some sense? No. And the way I put it is, if I were to point to a tree behind you, for example, in the mountains there,
Yeah.
chances are there's not a single other tree on the planet exactly like that tree in the angle of every stem and branch and leaf. So we could say that each tree is unique, and yet we can say things that apply to redwoods that are different from birches or aspens or oaks.
Mhm.
So, in that same way, each of us is unique. We're not just a number or a life path. We're unique in the sense that we have our own genetic heritage, our own life experience. So even twins born nearly the same time can be different. They can individuate because they have slightly different perspectives and life experience. Um, So we are unique, and yet we fall into certain patterns in our own way. And some of us work them more in the positive, constructively, creatively, others a little less so. And that's what makes a difference in lives. There is no better or worse life path, there is no superior or inferior, more or less evolved. All life paths have their strengths, their qualities, and their challenges. And I wrote the book, Michael, in order to help us have compassion and humor about ourselves and about other people as well, because we see everyone has their own path to climb up the mountain. And even those people in high school who seem to have their act so together, they were going through their challenges as well.
So it
So with that, we can turn to whatever you'd like to.
all right. Let's do that. But I put the mountain behind here for a reason today, because in the book you talk about viewing life as a journey up a mountain. What do you mean by that?
Well, especially related to this system, I like to remind people, which the numbers indicate what we're here to do, our purpose, which is a blend of three numbers, except there's one primary number as well. But what we're here to do is not necessarily what comes easiest.
Yeah.
For example, the number one I use is creativity, the creative seed, the beginning. And that doesn't mean people with a one in their birth number are automatically going to be super creative.
Yeah.
In fact, what goes along with that one is the challenge of insecurity. Ones often need to prove themselves because they don't know why they growing up they give reasons. It was my parents. It was what happened to me in school. But they don't feel equal necessarily to other people, so they always want to prove themselves. So so ones have to be willing to be different and take a risk to be different in order to bring out that creativity. So that's what I mean. That's why it's a mountain path. It's not easy to climb a mountain path, but once you get there, you've got the juice. You really have the view.
So what was I'm going to dive into our numbers and Jessica's in a second, but when
Okay.
you met with this warrior priest and he read you your numbers, do you know what the challenge was that the numbers were speaking to you?
He didn't talk about numbers at all. He never mentioned numbers. In fact, he was very um, he made a point of just, at some point in the conversation, he asked when my date of birth, among
Yep,
other
yep.
information, but he never mentioned numbers at all. I brought it into the fore. I brought it into the world and was straight about it. He preferred people to think him just clairvoyant almost, and just he just knows these things rather than I'm determining this largely from a system.
So without giving you numbers, was his challenge to you that you get to go forth into the world and be a teacher? What was his, based on his reading, his um, calling you out?
Well, I first of all, it was 1985, so I can't really quote verbatim
No, no.
what he told me, but he did, knowing what I know now. My life path is described by the numbers 2 6 and then a slash mark and then 8 2 6 8, and the eight. I didn't like to hear this very much, but eights have a natural drive for recognition. They have a strategic approach to thinking about things. They have a certain depth of intelligence. They can, um, and there's issues with power, not really bringing out our power into the world. So giving mixed messages. So there are hurdles and qualities. And the six has perfection issues, never feeling good enough, and so on. Um, and the two is about supporting people. So he was looking at those numbers and then checking out some other things, his own internal gifts. So he even actually did an archetypal past life reading. It's actually, one can use these numbers, those who want to do intuitive type readings of this nature, and tell stories that can be healing and revealing. So that's what he did for me. He told this story, and he also informed me about certain qualities I had that I could bring out into the world. See, it wouldn't have had the impact unless it deeply resonated with me.
Mhm.
I always remind people in my workshops, seminars, I say, I can't tell you anything you don't already know at deeper levels, but we tend to forget. So I'm like a yellow highlighter in the book of life. So when someone looks in the book and sees their life path, there's something in that that resonates within them that they kind of knew but didn't know. Lily Tomlin, the actress,
Yeah,
once said, "I've always wanted to be somebody, but maybe I should have been more specific."
that's
And
lovely.
and that's yeah, that's what the book helps people to do, to be more specific and brings things into focus.
All right, so let's go then. I have a birthday coming up. When this comes out, and I'm not sure, it'll be a couple days since my birthday.
Hmm.
And so I looked up the numbers, I reversed things. So I'm excited to hear what you have found when you look up my numbers.
Sure. Um, well, when we did the calculator, or when I just added them up, one can learn to do that. In the back of the book, it shows people how to do the math if they want to. Um, I came up with the birth number 32/5. Now,
Mhm.
each of these numbers, 1 through 9, and the 0, have a certain meaning. And here's some things I would say. If I just had met you and you said, "Oh, Dan, this is my number, 325, and this is my birth date. What can you tell me?" I would start out by saying, "You have an adventurous soul." One of the worst things in your life is boredom. You do not like boredom and sameness all the time. If there's no drama going on, you will create one, because and you love helping and rescuing, especially if there's a way to get into adventure. You told me you started bike racing again,
Mhm.
and again, that's an exciting thing to do. So that feeds you. That feeds that drive, that innate drive. Most of all, freedom is an important word for you. It's a key word. And I don't mean freedom like indulgence, doing it whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. You and I both know that's not true. But it's the freedom to explore life to its fullest, to look at things from different angles, from the mountaintop, from down in the forest. Um, you can see things from many angles. You can see people's points of view. Um, you have that multifaceted, multiplex mind, a quick mind, actually. It's a sort of a quickness. Um, so what's key for you is discipline, because you have an interest in so many topics. There's a danger of getting scattered because you want to do this and know about this and know about that. If you have a choice of money in the bank or a new experience, you'll pick the new experience. So now that's true. Again, I'm not presuming to know you inside, Michael, but I'm reading the pattern that you're working. So you'll relate to a lot of this. Um, the see, many numerology systems just say, "Oh, you're a 5, or you're an 8, or you're a 7," but actually, there's a big difference in a 145
Mhm.
and a 325. Um, so the other numbers are also important. The 3 has to do with expression, um, a drive to express, a need to express yourself. I think that I use the word need very carefully. Merce Cunningham, a choreographer, once said, "I'm not looking for people who want to dance. I'm looking for people who need to dance." And that is a key word in the life paths. Threes don't just like to express themselves, they need to. And they can go into a funk a little bit if they feel blocked in their expression. But what we're here to do, we can also help others to do. So right now, I'm expressing myself a lot ad nauseum.
Yeah.
But the point is, I'm going on and on. And the thing is, helping others to express themselves will give you a similar kind of satisfaction, since we're all connected anyway.
Mhm.
So you're a lot about expression, about supporting people. The 2 is about cooperating and working with other people. And then the 5 is the key. The one on the right
Yeah.
is usually the strongest number. That's why I would say freedom. Now, there are some issues, and I wonder what your wife would say about this. But there's a dependence independence, kind of a swing back and forth. You strive for independence, but sometimes you feel dependent in some way. So that interplay for 5s of dependence and independence is a key one. Um, and you're here, of course, for interdependence, not an extreme independence or not an extreme dependence, but interdependence, and here to learn that to balance that. So that's what I would say. Now, that may not mean too much, to your listeners, but that's what I would say if I were doing just a mini reading, a surface reading of your number.
Thank you. So for listeners, there's some key numbers here. First off, you're talking about the life path number. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, I can say this. I've never been particularly interested in numerology.
Yeah.
I've read some books in the past, long distant past, and I found it to me about 40% accurate and a little bit vague. There was the soul path, the life path, the destiny path, and so many paths. It just got confusing. Um, the system as I present it in the life you were born to live is pretty direct. It's simply your birth number indicates
Hmm.
some issues and qualities and hurdles you'll find on your life path from here on out. Um, and you'll feel most on track when you're addressing those issues. But most people don't know what they are. So they kind of stumble in the dark. And I like to shed a light on the path.
Since we're talking about issues, you talk about in the book both positives and I don't think you call them negatives. It's maybe it's like a negative potential. What can you tell us about that, or maybe use me as an example? Continue to guinea pig me, although you actually were, in a sense, talking about some positives and some challenges.
Well, you mentioned your wife's life path too, so I can use hers because
Please.
express. All right, let me give an example. And I actually, for every birth number, for every life path, I give specific a description of what that looks like when we're working it in a more positive way.
Hmm.
By positive, I mean constructive, a mature way. Um, and sometimes children begin working it in a more negative way or immature way, destructive way. Ones, for example, are here for creative energy and to bring that into the world, whether it's business, the arts, whatever. And I tell anybody working the one or double one, you are going to be creating. And you're either going to be creating in the positive or the negative, but it's got to come out. And in the same way for a three, like your wife, she will be expressing in the positive or expressing in the negative, but she needs to express herself. It could be through art or music or words or writing, any which way, but it's a form of emotional expression. And that's now, isn't that true for anybody? I mean, anybody can be creative. Anybody can express themselves. Anybody can even have perfection issues, but it's more acutely felt by those on that particular life path. So when I say positive and negative, it's not so much judgmental as like talking about the positive and negative poles of a magnet.
Hmm.
It's just different ways to manifest. I've never figured out why some clever technological people create a new app or something really helpful to people, and others create a virus. Why do they choose to do that? Maybe family issues, who knows? But some choose to be more positive and some manifest more in the negative. That's the interplay and the drama of life.
Since we're going interplay and drama, we're kind of jumping around in the book, but we'll double back since you pulled up Jessica's numbers, if I understand them right, are a 2, 1, and then the 3.
Right.
When you combine these things, this is important to understand for our relationships, isn't it?
Well, yes. In fact, anyone who has already done it or plans to go to the peacefulwarrior.com and click on the life purpose calculator, it not only shows their birth number and a sample of their life path information, but they will also see a relationship, a composite number. So if they put in the date of birth
Hmm.
of a significant other, it could be them and a child, or a partner, a spouse, a parent, they will better understand the interplay of their relationship with that person. It's like the purpose of that particular relationship. When they're together doing something, it brings up an energy that may be quite different from either of their individual life paths. For example, my wife is working 202,
Hmm.
20/2. I'm working 268. 8 and 2, as it happens, add up to 10. So my wife and I together are working a lot of creative energy issues that go along the positive and the challenges,
Hmm.
and spiritual gifts, because the zero represents certain capacities we all have, but they can have them and manifest them in a greater degree. So that seems to fit our relationship. We've created a lot with Peaceful Warrior Services together. And yet I'm more insecure around my wife than anybody. So that's the insecurity part of the one. So again, I know this sounds like up in the air to people who are not familiar with the system, but it's a bit of an exposure anyway. And if they look up their number, it will
Hmm.
start to make a bit more sense.
So since I looked up numbers beforehand and I was wrong, uh,
Mhm.
If we take me as a 3-2/5,
Hmm.
Jessica as a 2-1/3, and we
Right.
combine them together in a soup, what do we get and what are the challenges that we get to look at or work on?
Well, fortunately, we don't have to combine all the numbers. That would be indeed a soup, alphabet soup or numeric soup. But it's just the five and the three make an
Okay.
eight. They make an eight together. So your work is around eight issues, and eight could be power struggles at times in the negative, but it can also empower both of you in the positive. Does that make sense? How in the positive you become more powerful
Mhm.
and empower you both. In the negative, you sometimes have control issues and power struggles. You're trying to control me. No, I'm not. Um, that sort of thing. So, but eight also brings a deep sense of intelligence, uh, and also a desire to influence. Maybe each of you helps the other to influence others,
Mhm.
or you influence each other, because in the book I've actually reinterpreted that number. I used to call it abundance and power,
Yeah.
a striving for material success, money issues, but now I'm calling it influence and abundance,
Mm.
because I think influence, the eight, really has a lot to do with a movement. I'm a 268, so I understand this innately. um, I really love influencing people. In the old days when I was a gymnast, I coached gymnastics, and I love doing it that way. But as my picture of life expanded, now I reach out to people and do my best to influence them in a positive way through this kind of work.
Excellent. So since you're talking about work, how can we use these numbers as we're talking today about finding your purpose, direction, path as well, first off, to discover your purpose, then we'll go into careers.
Sure. Well, you're asking a very good question here, and it may serve your listeners well to mention. More recently, I had written a book, a small book called The Four Purposes
Mhm.
of Life.
Yeah.
That provides a context for almost all my work. So, the first purpose I describe in the book, very briefly, is simply about learning life's lessons. Not just learning from our life experience, but recognizing Earth is a school. And if you learn anything, you cannot fail as long as you've learned a lesson. That is a fundamental purpose we all share. And it turns out there are 12 courses we need to pass, but that's another topic for another interview. The second purpose is what we normally think of our purpose is finding our career
Mhm.
and or calling. And I distinguish between the two, because a career, newsflash folks, you don't have to love your career. As much as you might have heard that, do what you love and the money will follow. The money may not follow. But when we talk about love, we're talking about our calling.
Mhm.
Our career is simply a way we produce an income to support ourselves and our families. And that's a very fundamental human quality. Since ancient times, people were trading their skills, their services, their crafts, and until we invented currency
Yeah.
as a medium of exchange. But people have been doing that. It's a perfectly appropriate thing to do to make a living. And that's our primary purpose of a career. We might love our work. We might love the people we work with. But if we weren't making any money doing it, we'd have to find something else. So, career, it's nice if we find something suitable, appropriate to our interests, values, and talents. But we don't have to love everything about it or love it every day. Whereas our calling is what we would choose to do in our free time. We just feel internally a calling to do that. Someone might work as an accountant, but they love playing guitar. So, guitar is more a calling, and accountant doing bookkeeping and so on, and accountant work is their career. So that's another purpose. And some people's calling and career are the same. Mine happens to be, perhaps yours too.
Yeah.
Um, but the third purpose is the one covered in depth in the life you were born to live, the major topic today.
Mhm.
The fourth purpose we might as well touch upon, which is the purpose arising in each arising moment. So you talked about career. Now, what can the numbers tell us? Is that what you're asking pretty much about our career?
Yeah, and then let's dive into this third purpose because that may be the most important to understand in this Earth School as it pertains to today. But yes, let's do career.
Yes. Okay. What I want to emphasize here is people might go to the book saying, oh, good, now my number is going to tell me what job I should do. And I need to make it very clear that you can look in any profession, you can look at any sport, including bicycle racing.
Mhm.
And if you get the date of birth of all the top Olympic bike racers or doctors or um, dentists or plumbers or any profession, you will find people of every life path doing those professions. So it doesn't unerringly point us to a specific job. However, there are indications of the type of work generally we need to do. So the birth number, more than anything, describes our approach to that job,
Mhm.
how we will do that. Here's an example.
Yeah.
Actors. Robert Downey Jr. is working the 2911. So a double one life path, big hearted guy, a lot of charisma, and a lot of creative energy. And if I'd never met him or heard of him, I'd be telling you the same thing. It's not because I watch Iron Man, okay? Um, but Downey will do like 6 or 8 different takes, and they're all different
Mhm.
because he's so creative. Meryl Streep, though, is working 336, and she has all that sensitivity and really high standards. So, for example, when she was going to play a music teacher, she actually learned to play the violin well just to play this role. That's how she approaches. And nobody's better at dialect than she is. She can play so many different accents because of that expressive energy. So, again, it's how she approaches the work. So you can see people have very different life paths, can be very good at what they do, but they have a different approach to it.
Mhm.
So it will help us to see the hurdles we have in our profession and how we can overcome them. And that's another topic, the spiritual laws, we can get to. So I am not telling people this is the job. It's not a career counseling book. That would be wonderful, but I can't honestly say it does that. However, if somebody's working like a 257,
Mhm.
7 is an introspective number, a lot of insight into themselves. It's an inward turning number, and sevens need time by themselves. They thrive on that to recharge their batteries. Now, it's true for anybody, but more so for 257s. And so they would be very good researchers, scholars. If somebody needed a volunteer to go to Mars, that would be a 257 because they'll be fine traveling alone with himself for extended periods of time. So it does indicate the kind of work someone might be good at. A 246, they've got the strength of the 4, they have the high standards of the 6, and the wanting to help people with a 2, like body workers, massage therapists. They'd be really good at that, even though they'd never feel good enough because that's the tendency of the 6. So you get the idea that that's how it relates to professions. And
Mhm.
I do have sections in the book about finances and money and sexuality and career and finances. So I do give indications for each life path of the kinds of general work they might find satisfying and suitable.
Thank you. So from there, let's go. And I want to dive into a few of the laws of spirit. But before do that, you said this is really pertains to the third purpose. What is that, and how can this help us?
Well, I wrote The Life You Were Born to Live many years before The Four Purposes of Life.
Mhm.
I wrote that little book to provide a sense of this is where all my books fit together. This is the bigger picture. So, the third purpose of life in that little book is specifically and precisely what we're talking about, the material in the life you were born to live. It's finding your hidden calling, what your inner drive is to do that you might not have had been clear about. For example, I was very disappointed to hear that material success was central to my life purpose. I said, no, 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 that can't be right. I'm a spiritual guy. I don't care about amassing loads of money and all this. But he said, well, like it or not, it's part of your life path. And I started owning it. I started going, well, maybe there is something there. Maybe I do like a sense of recognition. And so now I can own it and stop avoiding it because often we do. We avoid the things that are most central to us.
It's interesting how that works, that you can have that kind of backlash against it from within until you're almost given permission.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, money is an innate interest to any 8. Money, career, finances. It doesn't mean they go into business. They could be an artist, but Believe me, money is not going to be something they will ignore. And in fact, and yet we have mixed feelings about it. Like the boxer Joe Louis, who said, "I don't really like money, but it calms my nerves."
So, and I'm thinking of Jessica and myself as an eight together trying to build
Hmm.
something really special. That's one
Hmm.
heck of a lever to help to move the world.
Yes, exactly. The right leverage. Isn't that what we're all seeking to make a difference in the world? Quick story,
Please.
only partly related to our topic. Um, During the Vietnam War, I was going to UC Berkeley as a
Mhm.
college student way back when, and I was doing a lot of work on myself. Self massage, self analysis, meditations, all this inner directed work. And we were walking down Telegraph Avenue, and I said, "Hey, Sock, I feel kind of guilty doing all this work on myself when there's so many people in need out there and causes. Shouldn't I be more of a political activist and be sitting in and doing all these things? I'm just focusing on my own navel." And he turned to me and said, "I'll give you $5 if you can slap me on the cheek. Go for it, Tiger." Well, I thought it was some kind of test, so I bobbed and weaved, and then I quickly tried to slap him on the cheek, and I found myself on the ground a few moments later in a rather painful wrist lock. And as he let me up to my feet, I was shaking out my wrist. He said, "Do you notice a little leverage can be very effective, Dan?" I said, "Yes, Sock. That good lesson." He said, "Well, if you want to help people and be active and go out there and so on," he said, "Yeah, do what your heart tells you to do, but don't neglect the work on yourself because then you'll develop the clarity and to know how to exert the right leverage at the right place at the right time." And that's what I've been striving to do ever since.
Woohoo! So from there, let's dive into a few. Well, first off, what are the laws of spirit?
Yeah, good question. I even wrote another little book called The Laws of Spirit to convey that in a generic way, not related to the life paths, but in
Dan,
in the
I've got to pause you for a second.
yeah,
I do not believe one thing that you've said, and I know you've said it in the last show. You've said it again today. I do
yeah.
not believe your next book will be your last.
I'll tell you why. Remember that anecdote I just related a few minutes ago about Merce Cunningham? I'm looking for people who need to dance.
Yeah.
I'm not a writer. I don't describe myself as a writer by calling. I never grew up saying I'm. In fact, a 10-page paper intimidated me. Um, but I love to teach. I love to influence. And one way to do that is through writing. So I ended up writing my first book, and it seemed to end up being fairly popular, well received. So I wrote other books as well, and they also seemed to be well received. So I continued doing it. But I don't need to write. And so it just feels right. With the next book, my 18th book, it's only taken me 40 years to do it. Um, I'll rest. I'll go feed the pigeons in Washington Square Park here in New York City, um, and just smile at people. You know, and I'll go where I'm invited to teach. But no, writing is was a good thing to do, but I don't need to do it. In the same way, you might say, "Wait a minute, Dan. I noticed you don't have a one in your birth number. Does that mean you can't be creative?" No, of course I can be creative. Anyone can, whether or not they have a one. But I don't need to create, whereas ones need to do it to feel like they're on track. So that's the difference. So, but I really appreciate that you don't believe me, and people have said they're disappointed. Wait a minute, Dan, keep writing. I want you to write more books. But no, I think the next one will round it out beautifully, and it'll feel right.
Very
And
good.
I'm a busy grandpa anyway, so I have grandkids to attend to. So, but this one I really need to do this last book. But thank you for mentioning that.
You're most welcome. So now, going back to the laws of spirit and a book that you
Yes.
wrote on the laws of spirit.
Yes. Well, before I did that, I'll tell you, I the most important section in the life you were born to live is part four, I believe, which is on the laws of spirit, and I define them as they're not laws like E equals MC squared. They're not stated in mathematical terms. That would be a bit dry. They're more essential reminders for living. The law of balance, the law of process, the law of flexibility is one you wanted to touch upon. These are essential reminders about life and how life works because there are an infinite number of spiritual laws. They describe the cycle of the seasons, how waves break on the beach, how flowers turn toward the sun. These are the laws of the universe. But there are certain laws that can be expressed that apply most specifically to human beings and how to live wisely and well. They're like the school rules. You've heard there's a school, they're the school rules. And the more we align ourselves with these laws in a general sense, the more smoothly our life goes. We're not swimming upstream. We're not struggling as much because we see where the currents of life go. So I wrote these laws in the context of the life paths. So the laws in the book specifically point to certain life paths and how we can overcome the hurdles on those paths because everybody has challenges. So what makes the book a little special is that it doesn't just tell you about yourself, it actually tells you what you can do to make your life better and to work that life path in a more positive way. So that's how the spiritual laws evolved. And it was only later that I said, they're so important. They deserve a book on their own. And that's why I wrote the other little book dealing with specifically with it.
Excellent. So let's talk about a few laws. I was going to go into a few related specifically to me because we'll call that me search here. But
Mhm.
let's start with the law of flexibility, and then maybe you can give us one or two laws that maybe actually pertain to an 8, something you're familiar with, and Jessica and I get to do a dance with as well.
Sure. Well, look, we all recognize that life comes at us in waves of change that we cannot predict or control.
Mhm.
And sometimes we like the change and sometimes we don't. But we can learn to surf. And the law of flexibility is about learning to surf. Uh, one easy example. Well, somebody once wrote to the Federal Bureau of Agriculture because he had crabgrass and he was trying to get it out of his regular lawn. This crabgrass kept growing up. And they told him some advice, what he could do, and he tried it and it didn't work. So he contacted them again and said, okay. And they said it didn't work. And he going back and forth. It was like cosmic tech support. And um, finally, they wrote back a few words. They just said, learn to love crabgrass. And
I love it.
in a way that expresses the law of flexibility. Um, we can learn to flow with life as it occurs, as it arises. And so, I if I were to ever do a PhD program, I haven't, but if I did, I'd probably do some study where I would test people's mental flexibility.
Mhm.
And then I would take them through a program of modern dance and stretching and flexibility. And
Cool.
as their body became more supple, and I predict that their attitude system would also become supple. Because most of us, when we get older, we get into these set routines of doing things. We get in the shower, we turn the same direction, we soap off in the same order. We go into these routines of doing things, and we can develop a condition later in life called psychosclerosis, which is hardening of the attitudes. And we have to watch for that. So the law of flexibility applies to our bodies, but also our minds, our emotions. Let's say you went to a favorite restaurant and you were waiting for their favorite dessert. You were so looking forward to this particular dessert,
Yeah.
and at the end of the meal, you said, "All right, now, okay." And you ordered, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry, we just ran out." Um, but see that person sitting at the table next to you, they just got the last piece. Oh, they seem to be enjoying it. And instead of wait a minute, you have this on your menu. I came here a long ways just to be here and to get this dessert. You can go that way, or you can say, "Oh, now I have a chance to try something new." So that's applying the law of flexibility. That's one example. I go into it in more depth, of course, in the book.
Excellent. And then can you give us a law to look out for or to learn about for 8s?
There's a law that many people can misinterpret. It's called dishonesty forfeits divine aid. And by dishonesty, we normally think of lying to other people, and that can be true. We can misrepresent ourselves, and we can use people as objects and court them to get a favor from them, that sort of thing. And it can be manipulative, and that's part of it, the strategic thing, rather than just treating people with respect and honoring that. But it's really about self-deception. It's about seeing ourselves clearly, being dishonest with ourselves. What do you really want? What do you really want here? And be upfront with it. We can deliver any message if it's in the right envelope and has a return address. That's a good one for threes as well as eights. It's not one law just for one life path, but that's how the law applies. The law of that dishonesty forfeits divine aid, and it's a kind of a wake up call for many eights. I'm still working on it. You might say, "Oh, Dan, well, you've done all this work. You must be working your life path totally in the positive." And I'd say, well, more of the time, more moments. But I still have times I work it in the negative. We all do. So it's important for us to be gentle with ourselves, to have compassion for ourselves and for others who are always working and refining. It's not about perfecting, it's about refining our life path over time.
That brings us to maybe the most important law. What can you tell us about the law of love?
The law of love is entirely meaningless until we begin to recognize truly we are all one. Otherwise, you're just loving some
Thank you.
person for motives of our own or non-motives. They just attract us, but they're still an other, somebody to use, to exploit, to form a bond with for purposes of our own, and so on. But once we start to see, as I see your lovely visage right here in my video screen,
Mhm.
I see a part of me. Everywhere I look on the subways in New York City, these are all different aspects. We're all the same consciousness. It's been said that love is recognizing the same consciousness in others as in ourselves. And when we recognize that, all these billions of eyes, the same light is shining. And once we get that, love manifests. We don't have to try to love or read books on sentimental topics. We just can't help ourselves. My friend and colleague Byron Katie is like that. She can't help herself. She just loves because it's self-love ultimately. It's
Mhm.
a kind of a paradoxical thing. Also, love is not just a feeling, it's an action, it's a practice of treating others with loving kindness. And that takes a lot of wisdom to know how to treat others with loving kindness. There are times tough love is appropriate as well. So, love is an action and a practice. It's a way of radiating. It's a way of asking ourselves, how do I behave when I feel in love with the world, with other people, and behaving that way, bringing it into life as a practice, as a reality?
Woohoo! What advice, speaking of love, and unfortunately a term my mom used a lot with me growing up, tough love, what advice would you give parents to help their kids based on this?
Well, it of course depends on the age. Little kids are like puppies. They're very simple. Feed them when they're hungry. Keep them safe as much as you can without being a helicopter parent. Give them a lot of hugs. Show they're important by occasionally making them a priority over your smartphone, that sort of thing. And read to them. Read to them
Thank
when
you.
they're little instead of screen time. Because that develops their imagination. If they're just watching a video, they're not developing their imagination as much as listening to a story. They love stories. My granddaughter's always, "Hi, Grandpa, tell me a story." I think that's my name. It's a long one. "Hi, Grandpa, tell me a story." Um, so all those things is something we can do to show our love for children in a very real way, rather than just say, "I love you" a lot.
Can we use this, or would it be good to use this as parents to look at our kids and to help them on their life path?
Well, I think it's quite helpful to know the birth numbers and life paths of our children. It really helps us understand them in a different way, as well as our parents. Wow, what insight I have in them,
Ooh,
even though
cool.
they both passed away, but so much love for them to see, oh, that's what they were working on. But we no, I do not advise telling children their birth number or telling them you're working this life path. Let them just be little kids, grow up, learn their life path. When they're teenagers, if they express an interest in knowing these things, then yeah, show them the book.
Very, very cool. On that note, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
You know, I can only speak moment to moment, and in this moment, it's just sharing with you that woohoo moment. That's what brings me happiness right now. And you know what? There is no future happiness. because the future is always tomorrow. We're either happy now or we're not. And right now, I feel quite delighted.
Awesome. So, on that note, where can people go to be quite delighted as well, to get your beautiful book and to find out more and to find their numbers?
Oh, very difficult to find this book. Somebody maybe wearing white on a street corner. You have to get initiated. No, actually, the book is everywhere. It's online on the favorite online retailers, but local bookstores support those too.
Mhm.
If they don't have it, or even the library. Somebody is short on a budget, they can go to the library. But the new edition may not be in the library yet, and it really does have material not in the earlier editions.
And then the
So
website one more time.
yes, peacefulwarrior.com. And if they haven't done that, click on the Life Purpose Calculator. There are also online courses and other features at the site.
Beautiful. And if you didn't catch peacefulwarrior.com, come on over to inspirenationshow.com and we'll get you over to peacefulwarrior.com. Dan, this has been brilliant. This has been beautiful. I want everybody to go out and to learn, to use that life calculator and learn for themselves. Any last words of wisdom before we dive into a brief meditation?
I just want to say you do inspire the nation, Michael, and thank you for the work you do. And I'll be happy to do that brief guided meditation whenever you like.
Go for it, except I'll say
Okay.
if you're driving down the road, and thank you, received. If you're driving down the road, you might want to wait to do this later, after you're parked or once you're home.
I highly recommend that as well. But actually, I'm not going to require people to close their eyes or
Yeah.
get solemn. I just want to give a very short preview of a 4-minute peaceful warrior meditation I've created.
Mhm.
And so this isn't even going to take 4 minutes because uh, they can always go online. They can see it at my website. It's one of my e courses. But this meditation actually is a meditation on the process of dying.
Ooh.
And most people go, "Oh, that sounds like something I'm not going to go to," because people are concerned. They don't want to think about death, the end of life. But by going through this meditation, and I do it in the sauna at the Y, I do it on the subway, I do it at various locations, I contemplate all that I give up in the process of dying. So it starts with taking some breaths, breathing in the good stuff, light energy into the body, breathing out the bad stuff, any darkness, any toxicity, negativity, whatever. Breathing in the good stuff, breathing out the bad stuff. And once we do that and take a few breaths in that way, filling with a light and then exhaling any darkness, then with every breath, we contemplate something else that comprises our life that we give up when we die. And it begins with time, time, past and future, the ability to imagine, to remember, gone. All we have is the present moment. No, there's no choice about it though. When we die, all that's gone. Memories washed away. The future no longer there for us, just this moment. And I'm going to take you through this in a way that's a little bit quicker. It's because when I teach it, it takes over an hour to really give people a sense. But then we go through objects. We release all objects, everything that we possess or that possesses us. We stand naked as we came into the world. Then we let go of all our relationships. Everyone we know, friends, adversaries, acquaintances, loved ones, we cut that, it's gone. You can't take them with you. Whatever we believe about what happens after death, when we die, we say goodbye to that. And then comes other qualities such as action, the ability to move. Emotions fade away into kind of a grayness. Then all our senses, taste vanishes. We don't need it anymore. No more food, no more taste. Then we let go of smell, and then we let go of sight, and then no more sound, complete silence, darkness. Then we let go of any sensation. At that point, we don't even know we have a body anymore. So it's finally easy to cut the thread to the self. No more self. Easy to let go of. No more sense of a body. And then all there's left is awareness. And all that's left, because we haven't literally died, is the breath. The flow of the breath, reception and release. And we watch the breath. Just watch it happening in and out. The cycle, the natural cycle. And finally, we end with a deep cleansing breath in with a light out with the darkness, in with the light, out with the darkness. Now, I know I went through that fairly quickly, but the whole point of this meditation on letting go of all we have in life is when we come back, as you open your eyes again, all of it comes flooding back: the ability to taste, to smell, to see, to hear, to feel, ability, time to imagine, to remember. All these things come flooding back, and it helps us in a way unlike any other to appreciate the life we were given. It's easy to say appreciate life. Don't take it for granted. But by doing this meditation daily, we not only prepare or rehearse for death and lose some of the fear of the unknown, but we also begin to appreciate the little things in life, every taste, every smell. Uh, so that's what I wanted to share, at least in that way.
Dan, I don't know any other way to put this. I love you, and I love having you on the show.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Woohoo! So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the life you were born to live, and begin finding your life purpose today, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Dan.
Oh, Michael, really, it's always just a joy to have some time with you. You're doing some great work, and I certainly wish you well, and give Jessica my regards too.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!